Siddhartha's first taste of the outside world would reveal stark realities. With the naivety of a child, he set out with Channa, his charioteer, as his guide. The prince would make 4 journeys and see 4 signs, as predicted by the palace fortune teller. Early Buddhist texts place great importance on this point in the story, as each journey would reveal to Siddhartha an aspect of life which had been deliberately hidden from him. On his first trip, Siddhartha went out into the country, away from his father's influence. He noticed an old man painfully making his way through a village. He asked Channa what was wrong with the man, and Channa explained the process of aging to him. Siddhartha was alarmed when he learned that aging is inescapable and happens to us all. For Siddhartha, reality was beginning to unveil a cruel picture of the world, where misfortune and suffering appeared to dominate every aspect of life. The second sign was soon to follow, when Siddhartha noticed a sick man, his features twisted with disease. He asked Channa if anyone could become sick, and again he was shocked when he learned the brutal truth that we all can. The protective wall of fantasy around him was beginning to crumble, and the further the young prince ventured, the more of life's horrors confronted him. Now he saw a corpse bound in linen being carried to the funeral pyre, and the story records that Siddhartha is appalled to discover not only that all men are mortal, but also that it was a Brahmin belief that after death we are all reborn, to suffer and die, time and time again. There seemed no end and no solution to life's miserable and inevitable cycle.
The Buddha's life is an allegory because the most important point in it is that here is a young man who's brought up in every luxury, and he realizes that isn't enough because he has a shock. He has a shock because for the first time he encounters old age, disease, and death. It's not plausible to think that growing up as an intelligent youth, he wouldn't have known anything about it. The point is rather to convey the tremendous impact that coming face to face with these fundamental facts of human existence has and must have upon us, and that it's urgent that we do something about it.
But it was the fourth sign that would definitively point to Siddhartha's future. A man wearing a simple robe with a begging bowl before him. Why should anyone want to give up the pleasures of the world to wander the countryside begging? Asked the prince. Channa explained that the man had renounced such pleasures in order to confront reality and seek answers to this painful existence.
The account of the 4 signs I see as quite an effective story way of putting certain existential realizations. We all know we're going to get old, we all know we're going to get sick, we all know we're going to die in our heads. But it's very different to sit down one day and realize here, no, it's not just other people that get old, sick and die. It's I'm going to get old, I'm going to get sick, and I'm going to die. And I think the story accounts are trying to portray that moment of existential realization where you see it for the first time. You're going to die, and you know it, you taste it.
When Siddhartha returned to the palace after this 4th journey, his mind was reeling with his new understanding of the world. The fruits and flowers around him would rot and wither away. Even the walls of the palace would one day crumble. His wife had just given birth to a beautiful child, but they would both one day grow old, become ill and die. It was inevitable. He had learned the meaning of impermanence, and saw it in everything around him. Siddhartha knew he had to leave his family to seek answers to the questions that tormented him, even though this meant abandoning his wife and son. Against the tradition of his family and the Brahmin religion, Siddhartha left home to find his own answers to life's suffering. One story recalls how a hypnotic mist sent the guards to sleep, allowing him to escape with Channa through the eastern gate of the palace. It is said that beside the river Anoma, he removed his jewelry, exchanged his robes for rags, and cut off his long hair. He asked Channa to carry them back to the palace. Siddhartha was alone for the first time. He had at last escaped the false world of palace life, where suffering had been swept out of sight. Now he needed to come face to face with reality, if he was ever to find a solution to the pain of existence. Siddhartha was confronted by suffering on a scale he'd never seen before when he arrived in the cities.
Within those cities, people being thrown together, at times there was perhaps an increase of disease and suffering. Some people have seen this as a particular trigger for the Buddha's emphasis on suffering. It accentuated the kind of universal problems that any human being in any society faces.
Siddhartha realized that if he was to find an answer to the suffering surrounding him, he would have to challenge the Brahmin religion under which everyone lived.
What the Brahmins had was sacred knowledge. This sacred knowledge centered on knowing certain texts called the Vedas. The word Veda itself simply means knowledge. And the implication is that that was the only knowledge which was really worth having.
With their sacred knowledge, Brahmin priests oversaw every stage of life, from birth to death. Their blessing was essential, but their knowledge could only be handed down to their sons. The position of Brahmin families remained assured until a new wave of thinkers began to challenge this.
There was a time when Brahmanism, early form of Hinduism, was being questioned. It was a little bit like the time of the ancient philosophers such as Plato and Socrates in ancient Greece. People debating, arguing with people, and the Buddha tried to cut the way through that. He described the context of a welter of views, a jungle of views.
As Siddhartha explored this jungle, he realized that the solution to life's suffering needed to be available to everyone, rather than an exclusive few, like the Brahmin tradition.
The Buddha disagreed with the Brahmins, and he said, one does not become a Brahmin by birth. One becomes a Brahmin by living well. One does not become an outcast by birth. One becomes an outcast by living badly. Now, that's a wonderful and important thought. It's like saying in our society, a true gentleman is not somebody who's born into a particular family, but somebody who behaves properly.